Well, hello, LinkedIn. Welcome to our weekly podcast of Wisdom Seeker Live. So glad to have you join us today, and excited to have a special guest today. Wanted to just do some housekeeping reminders. Please join us. Be sure and let us know what part of the world you're joining from. Type in the comments. And also, we enjoy having your comments and questions in the comments section so that we can talk about those, answer, discuss, whatever. Really enjoy having everyone engage. Also glad to have people from Facebook and YouTube. And just a reminder that the way we look at wisdom is it's a growth process. And it's an ongoing process. The first step in that process is to gain knowledge, which is facts, figures, and information. And then as we continue on the journey, to then begin to gain experience by applying that knowledge and putting it to use, and then personalizing it. And then the last step in that process is to gain wisdom in regards to it. And that includes the big aspect of wisdom that is different from knowledge and understanding is the seeing things from a much bigger perspective. Seeing things from outside of ourselves, and how it affects others is a big part of that. And for those of us that are of a spiritual bent, the way we kind of say that is seeing things from God's eyes so that we know how to respond properly and well for those that are around us and for those and for ourselves. So that's just the basis that we work from. And today I'm truly honored to have Dr. Addyson-Zhang. She is someone that I crossed paths with on LinkedIn. Don't remember how, but she is very much an expert in the education field and has been on quite a journey. So I'm going to bring Dr. I on and let her tell you a little more about her story and her journey, and then we'll go from there. Hello, Dr. I.
Hey, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Honored.
It is truly my honor, Dr. I. So share with the audience a little bit about your journey, especially, in general, but especially related to education, just whatever you would like the audience to know about you, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I pretty much spent my entire professional career in education. I got my master from Syracuse, and I got my PhD from University of Maryland. So shortly after that, teaching in the classroom. So I taught in the classroom in higher education for, my gosh, 15 plus years, a long time, and only came to the very sad conclusion. I felt like 70% of what I did as a college professor was to perpetuate the broken education model. Only 30% was to really serve my students. And I wasn't really happy with that. And I was also trying to make changes. Very, very hard to change an institution. So I resigned from my associate professor position and started to build my own kind of alternative educational program called Classroom Without Walls. And it has been an incredible journey. And so, yeah, that's kind of my story.
Well, you make an interesting comment, and I agree completely with you about the broken education system. Tell me a little bit about your perspective on what's broken.
Yeah, oh my God, I don't even know where to begin, like so many things. And I shared this quite a few times on my own show, like for example, when it comes to education, most people think of education as schooling, and they think education only happens inside a physical building, right? That's why
Mhm.
I intentionally called my own company Classroom Without Walls. Like students, parents, they only think when they go to that physical building where learning happens, where education happens. And but I truly believe only 20% of education happens inside the classroom, and
Mm.
80% actually happens outside the classroom. And when you think of learning as only limited to the classroom learning, and a big consequence is that many students, and to a great extent parents, are overly obsessed with academic performance.
Mm.
And lots of research has shown that academic score is not a good indicator of a person's lifelong success. In fact, like I think a few years ago, there was a big study that came out showing that GPA, grade point average, is actually inversely related to innovation orientation. In other words, the higher the GPA, the less likely that a student is to innovate. But then when you look at all the jobs of the future skills, 21st century skills, like all the skills require innovation. Then what
Mm.
are we doing in the classroom, making or forcing everyone to be so obsessed with their own grade, only to discover, wow, this is such a poor indicator of a person's like innovation, for example. So that is just like one example.
Yeah, that's a good one. I know that while I was teaching, learned about a statistic that was rather interesting. Of course, I taught in the career and technical area when I was teaching, and what we understood, and there was a study done that among students that attend universities, colleges, if the students had had a focus area in a business or career and technical area,
Mm,
that they had a much higher success rate even at the university, and
mm,
is kind of peculiar because the so many of the universities do not recognize the value of that part of education, and certainly in the K-12 sector, it is not respected. Yet, if young people are engaged in that, they have a greater chance of being successful. And
mm,
so, and I think that's because, like you've mentioned, uh, when you are involved in a class like that, you end up having to think. You have to do problem solving, and you have to innovate. And
mm,
because anyone that knows much about being in a career, being in a business, especially as an entrepreneur, if you don't know how to problem solve, innovate, and get creative, you're in trouble from the beginning.
mm.
So just you would think that education, being supposedly a promoter of science and learning and understanding, would be so focused on those things and support those things.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your journey in earlier education.
Yeah, in the early days, yeah, I was just like a traditional college professor, and I graduated from University of Maryland, which is a research university. So
Mm-hmm.
what really matters the most to me at the time was doing research. And in retrospect, I think that was such a big mistake because I was teaching public relations and later kind of digital PR, social media, branding classes. And I realized that if I wanted to teach those classes really well, I couldn't just be an academic, like just like theorizing,
Right.
reading books, teaching according to the book. But that was the early days of my teaching career, was mainly my teaching according to the book. And it really, my biggest wake up call was in spring, like March 2015. I was actually grading my students' papers at home during spring break. And I realized that, oh, wow, like students I thought they were like digitally savvy because they
Right.
grew up with social media and technology. And then I read in students' papers, they had never heard of Twitter. They didn't know what is Pinterest. I was like, oh my God. And then I realized that it was, first of all, like just because they grew up with technology,
Mm.
it doesn't make them an expert in terms of using technology like the way that you and I will use technology, to serve them as a professional networking tool, personal branding, business tool. That was my first like big aha moment. And second, I also realized that if I wanted to help my students to really embrace social media technology to build their personal brand, it's like as the teacher, I had to walk the talk. So that was the really beginning point that really triggered me to start building my own personal brand. By the time, I didn't realize I was building my personal brand. I was mainly walking the talk as a college professor. So everything I asked my students to do, I was also practicing those things myself, like blogging, being active on Twitter. Twitter was really big back then,
Right.
and live streaming, all those things. And that really laid a solid foundation later for my journey, kind of to quit my job, start my own company. But back then, it was really the intention to be a better teacher.
Yeah, it's remarkable that we think of learning from someone based on their experience in life, but so much of education, the formal education, academics, is driven by people that have only known academics and only lived academics. I know when I was teaching in high school, as the age I taught in, and it was always remarkable to listen to the people that I taught with, that their life experience was about being in school. And that was the primary experience they relied on, especially as a younger teacher, younger professor. That was all they had to offer, rather than, like you say, having walked the walk and be able to say, look, if you want to be a growth person or innovator, you got to be able to do these things. And I know because I'm doing them, or I have done them. And yet the system we have fosters that kind of situation that those folks only know the theory of it because of what's in the book. Tell me a little bit about your journey as a student. How was your journey through early school and then going into the university?
Yeah, great question. I actually grew up in China, so I'm a first generation immigrant to the United States. And when I was in China, and it is a totally different educational model, which I think is actually quite similar to the US now.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like just lots of exams and a very heavy focus on STEM. So back then we didn't have technology, of course, but there was a very heavy focus on like math, chemistry, physics. I felt like I spent my entire life, like at least primary school, learning about math. And so that was one thing I didn't really enjoy. I enjoyed physics before I started school, but as soon as school started, I was like, this is so boring. I think it's so much stress. And so like that is one thing, like a very rigid curriculum. There's very little emphasis on liberal arts, like arts. It's just absent. And I think the biggest trouble was a very, very heavy emphasis on like academic performance. And every time, for example, I don't know if they still do this in China. I went to a very good school throughout my K-12. And And so every time after a major exam was over, and once you walk into the school building and on the hallway, literally, like you will see everybody's grade. It's publicized. You will know.
Wow.
And in China, it is a country where people don't really care much about sports. They only care about academic performance. So you can imagine how humiliating it is for a kid if your score is like really low. So that's the very intense kind of competitive, a very academic rigorous environment that I grew up with. So I hated it, and I was a really good student. I did really well, throughout the journey. But internally, I was paralyzed. I hated my life. I also developed a very bad eating disorder. By the time I hit high school, I was like, enough is enough. But I still didn't know how to cope with it. Right? I still had to go to college. And the pressure, and literally every day you heard from teachers like, wow, there are only like, for example, 3 spots for an Ivy League school in China, and you are literally competing with each other. If you are not working hard, guess what? Kevin is like doing hard work at home. You better catch up with Kevin. So I also just didn't have friends. Nobody had friends. We were just like competing with each other. Right. And that was also very hard for like teenager, young adult that age. So life was a mess. I really hated it, but I survived. I think the only reason I survived was because many people, all of my friends, were in the same spot, same situation. And if I were the only one struggling with this, I don't think I could make it. I was suicidal. I was like eating disorder. I was as thin as a stick. But I was still like doing really well in school. And so that was the trigger that I really wanted to come to a different country, to see how other people in different countries actually learn, to really try out a different education model. I think that's also why I devoted my entire career to education. It is something I feel really passionate about to a great extent, was because of this horrible childhood experience in terms of education. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. First, let me recognize Ricky. Glad to have you this morning, Dr. Benet. Glad to have you. Feel free to offer comments and questions as we're going along so that we can address those. Yeah, I see. I am similar in that when I was going through school, I did not like school. It was from a little different angle. I was an average student. But the reason that I was an average student is, and we actually shared one concept, and that was the boredom of it. My mind was just so active and busy that sitting in a seat in a classroom for several hours a day was just hard for me. In fact, especially as a youngster, I got a lot of report cards that, I did okay on grades, but they were invariably talks too much, too social, can't focus on whatever. And so the only reason I survived school was that my parents made it very clear that if I wanted to live beyond 18, that I was going to complete my high school time and get a diploma of some kind. They fortunately, after that, they gave me some freedom to choose whether to pursue a university education or go to work or whatever. But again, the whole education experience, and now I am grateful that when I went through the competition to perform academically was not so great, because I suspect I would be in the same place that you were with just struggling with life. But now I know, and I'm in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And in the last couple of years, they came out with some studies in our area where a particular pocket of affluence around the north part of metro Atlanta, that they were highlighting in particular the problem with opiate drugs. But one of the side pieces that was truly troubling is the suicide rate among teenagers was remarkably higher And then the social scientists, the demographers, those folks that study that, attributed over 30% of that to the struggle with being academically successful. They talked about young people committing suicide because they didn't get into college they wanted. They didn't get the SAT score they thought they would get. And I thought, wow, that is a sad state for our young people, to put that kind of pressure so that that became life to them. And I think, wow, that if nothing else, how much that points to the brokenness of education.
Can I follow up on this, Kevin?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's such a great point. And so a few weeks ago, I had Dr. Peter Gray, who is such an advocate for alternative education. And he and I were just talking about this. In fact, I was surprised to discover this myself. According to American Psychological Association, the most stressed out population in the United States is actually teenagers. It's not like single parent. It's not like working professionals like us. It is teenager. I was like, wow. And a suicide rate over the last 6 years has increased like 6 times just among teenagers. Wow. I was like, wow, it is so sad when you read numbers like that. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Well, and education is not supposed to be a negative, bad thing. Now, of course, we learn when we struggle, and so not looking for a panacea for our young people where everything's easy. In fact, I think that's part of the problem too. We have made everything so easy, and that our young people don't know how to struggle and gain through that struggle and grow through that struggle. But it shouldn't be to the point that our young people are committing suicide over it. That's insane. It really is. And what I've always commented is that, and people don't understand, you were talking about your experience with your K-12 experience and, celebrating everybody's grades and so on. And for those that are academically strong, that's okay. But, and I don't know in China, but in the US, that probably represents about 30% of the population. And that leaves 70%, 60%, more than half that automatically have, whether it's explicit or implicit, have been labeled losers. And so no wonder that young people struggle, because this system that is supposed to be what fixes them and gives them opportunities in life has already told them they're a loser because they don't make good grades.
Yeah, and I think to follow up on that, I think in the US, students are facing like different types of social pressures. And like in China, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just talking about my childhood. I don't know if it's the case already. It's still this case now. So the only focus was on academic performance. Actually, yesterday, because we homeschool our kids, and my 9 years old, he was just reading a book. He was asking us, "Mommy, Daddy, what are those awards for?" And he was referring to like best looking, cutest couple, the most unique, the middle school yearbook. I don't know which book he was reading. And my husband was just sharing his schooling experience, and which made me realize, wow, kids are also facing this type of like social pressure, right? And best looking, I don't know, do you think they still do this type of labeling, kind of categorizing nowadays in middle school? But I think that's pretty awful for a young kid. There's most likely to succeed category, best looking category, most athlete category, all those categories. Like, I really hate there's so many reasons. One reason that I hate traditional schooling was because they really label you, right? You're an A student, you're a B student, but we all know our brain is plastic, right? We can grow. Like there's no correlation between how well I did as a young kid versus my future. And I think that type of labeling is very detrimental to our children's mental health and long-term success. What do you think, Kevin?
Oh, definitely. It's again, part of my focus and what I do is related to workforce and how to work with the younger workforce. And what I have to remind people that are hiring these young people is they're coming out already feeling like losers. And it's going to be hard for them to be motivated or take initiative because they've been told how, if they're not dumb, they've got a GPA, they've been told how they're not right in other ways. And it is just, it's sad. And I believe it still goes on. I mean, you still have the prom queen and kings and all of that stuff. And I appreciate celebrating excellence, but not excellence just in an academic setting. Promote different ways that people are excellent in life. I watch on LinkedIn. It's always fascinating. You see young people that build these elaborate homemade machines that start a ball rolling, and it just goes through all this process. And that may not be a major academic pursuit, but the innovation, the creativity, even engineering of things like that are remarkable. But that's not something that we celebrate within the formal education system. Welcome, Mohammed. Glad to have you back from Saudi Arabia. Good to hear from you. That is just such a problem within school. And then, one of my pet peeves is that the only way that you can be successful is to get a university degree. And what happens is the great percentages of those that start to pursue a university degree, they drop out. So once again, they've been labeled again. They're a loser. They didn't attain the gold ring, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, whatever term, by getting that degree. And so now they're losers again. Your thoughts?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like a big part of what I do, like on what is School for Education show, was really to demystify that. I actually have, and also the reason that my friend and I wrote the book and skip the degree, save the tuition. I mean, just in this book, we literally encourage those people who feel like, if formal education is not your thing, there are many alternative ways that you can succeed in life. On my show, I have interviewed so many high school dropouts, college dropouts. And in fact, my co-author, she is a college dropout, and she is also a multiple, like 7-figure company owner, that's internet marketing, ICO. And like, there are so many career options available without a college degree. And even if you feel like college is not the thing for you, you can still have a very fulfilling, happy life. In fact, the most extreme case, the person I interview on my show, he only went to middle school, has an 8th grade education, didn't even go to high school, and didn't go to college, but he's a local political leader, a self-made multi-millionaire, and has a very good life. And when he came to my show, he said something I will never, ever forget. He said, "I am so thankful for my lack of formal education because of that actually allowed him to be more creative, to think outside the box." He has 10 siblings. All of them got degrees. He was the only one who is the most successful in his family without a degree. And he said that even some of his siblings who have PhDs and master degrees are actually working for him. And he said that biggest difference that many people, like, they are thinking about finding a job because he's so different. He was thinking about, what can I create? What jobs can I create? It is such a different mentality. So I really want to encourage everyone watching this now on replay to really think, to really challenge this like assumption that
Mhm.
college is the only way to succeed in life, and I don't think so.
Now it's so many evidences to the contrary. Welcome, Linda. Welcome, Karen. Glad to have you. Linda says that she has a BS in IT, but she's still searching for a PhD program. And I do have to say that there are some careers where gaining a degree is unfortunately, fortunately, whatever, a necessary step to getting into that area of work. That is there, but what most people assume, and this is another myth that the education system promotes, and that is that all of the good jobs require a degree.
Mm.
And I got to look and see what the current Department of Labor statistics are, but the last that I know, they were somewhere between 25 and 30% of the jobs currently out there require a degree. So
Mm.
that leaves in excess of 70% that don't even require a degree. And one of the things I used to tell my students when they were considering their post high school options is that most of the job market doesn't require a degree. In fact, if you get a degree, you and apply for these jobs in that other part of the job market, you're labeled as overeducated and underexperienced, and
Mm.
then so you don't qualify for those jobs, and
Mm.
your degree has become a problem rather than an
Mm.
asset.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like in business, in digital marketing, like many like online careers, you don't really have to have a degree. That's kind of what I feel like. And also, like again, I have interviewed people who are in like copywriting. They literally told me the students who graduate from college with a writing degree or literature degree, they are not hireable. They are unhireable because
Oh, yeah.
academic writing and online writing are totally different. So the student really had to go through a process to unlearn what they have learned and to relearn. It just takes them, especially for a startup company, to train those students. And I also heard, when I interviewed Sheryl Bottom, she said that she actually preferred to hire self-taught videographer than students who actually graduate from school with I don't know if there's a degree, with a film degree or video editing
Mhm.
degree. And I thought that was really, really funny. Yeah, like maybe it's a trend, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, another interesting statistic that is out that, again, I shake my head and wonder why we don't challenge the myths around education based on it, is that I believe it's like 70% of people with degrees are not using their degree in whatever job they're in. And you
Mm-hmm.
kind of go, why? Because and maybe I'm too simple, but in my estimation, the reason you get an education is to prepare you to be in a career area, employed well and making a nice living. But 70% of the people aren't even being
Mm-hmm.
prepared for what they're doing.
Mm. Yeah, I write similar stats. It is like you will be like, oh wow, oh my God. Yeah, yeah.
Let
I think
me,
like school also functions as a business, right? I feel like when I was teaching in college, and we are always being encouraged, if a kid, especially a good student with a good GPA, and graduates from school, we just encourage the kid to continue to
mhm.
master degree, after that PhD, to like keep them in school for a long time. I was like,
Right. Yeah. I having raised 5 children, it's as one of my own children struggled trying to figure out their direction. I thought it interesting that they couldn't find a job, and in their mind, all of a sudden, the next thing to potentially pursue, they thought, well, I'll go get another degree. And I talked to my child and I said, why? You're talking about spending more money to get a degree that hasn't, additional education has done you no good to this point. So it's not logical. Let me share a comment here from Linda. Linda says, I find it fascinating is that Purdue assumed merged with Kaplan University, where when I was working as a Department of Energy as a subcontractor as well, and as an honorably discharged veteran. And so I'm not sure of the comment, but the merging of institutions and it's the business aspect that you mentioned has become big business. Think about the amount of money going into education, both public money, tax money, and the like, and so on, but just private money. You know, the cost right now. I know for me, this university I attended, which by the way, for transparency, I never completed my bachelor's degree. I came within a very close point of it, and but I attended Georgia State University, and right now Georgia State's cost estimate for attending as a full-time resident student is about $30,000 a year. And that's a lot of money. And, you know, I don't know if you're aware, in Georgia, we have a thing called Hope Scholarship, and we promote in our education system, well, keep a good grade and you'll get the Hope Scholarship. And the assumption that goes with it, it will pay for your education. And it's another myth, because out of that $30,000 a year education, the Hope Scholarship will pay for about $5,000 of that. So somebody has to come up with the additional money, and it's either mom and dad, it's the young person going in to student loan debt, whatever. But it's just a truly a sad place that we've gotten, that we are starting our young people out in a hole. You know, even in the worst situation in times past, young people started out with not much to have. In other words, they didn't have a whole lot. Well, we've gone from that to young people that are in debt and struggling to get back to not having anything.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's definitely, you know, many of our friends are still trying to pay off their college loans. It is sad. Yeah.
I was looking at Linda is sharing several comments. She's talked about being a sole proprietorship currently, and also using her experience to benefit veterans and humanitarian efforts. So that's great. And she makes a comment, if you're that grants are important, and if you're going to pursue a degree, yes, you better be a good essay writer and grant writer, so you can get some help with all of those expenses. So I get that. So what do you, you know, your concept of classroom without walls, I think is amazing. But tell us a little bit about how that works, how you function with your students, how they, what's their experience like?
Yeah, so I actually started running Classroom Without Walls, and I only resigned from my college professor position in summer 2019. And that was kind of my official journey to run this company. And like in the beginning, the programs I offered were like kind of group coaching program. But now I transitioned from that because I discovered like one-on-one coaching, one-on-one teaching is the best, as I truly believe learning has to be personal. So I have like different programs. Some of them are lifelong. And I really want to create this a school where students will have a teacher with them or mentor with them, like lifelong. So I have my highest kind of lifelong school. And then I also have like 3 months program. I also have a year-long program. And I design my own curriculum. So my own curriculum will cover digital media literacy because of what I shared earlier.
Right.
Students, they know they grew up with technology, but they really don't know, like, for example, how to go live, how to talk to the camera, how to build their personal brand, how to be active on LinkedIn. And even if for those who want to start a business, they have no idea how to go from like ideation to actually generating some profit. So that is kind of one aspect that I cover, like digital media skills, and a little bit entrepreneurship. And then the second pillar that I cover is life skills, like communication, collaboration, creativity, emotional intelligence. And the third pillar that I cover is mindset. And I truly believe life is an inside out journey. And under mindset, we have growth mindset, entrepreneur mindset, and also self-discovery. Like most students join my program, like not even those join my program, students in general, they have no idea who they are, what they want to do in life. This journey to discover the self is really missing. So I included that. So I'm kind of the lead coach. I work with my students on one-on-one basis. And I will also have a group of digital mentors who kind of do like coaching and Q&A with the students based on their interest. And we also have an in-person immersion component. And the in-person immersion component is almost like study abroad. We do it in different countries. I try to go outside the US so that our students can really get some exposure. Right before COVID, we did an event in Singapore. It was such an eye-opening experience for many students and the parents who came. So I can't wait for COVID to be over to bring back. So I'm thinking about doing the second one in Japan to do an immersion. But that's kind of the notion of classroom without walls. We go to different countries for the physical immersion, but a large part of my program is online. So I have students from all over the globe.
Very good. And Linda makes another comment that as a previous online student, found it extremely advantageous for time management and having a full-time job and a home. Yeah, the online option allows you to have your education in context of life. And that's what is so missing in education, is the lack of those the context. And welcome, Navara. I apologize, I missed you earlier, Navara. Glad to have you. Thanks for your comment. But one of the things that I used to make a priority when I was teaching within the education system was giving young people a context. Part of the reason that I was so bored in school is quite often my mind was going to, why do I need this? And in fact, I know the Gates Foundation did a study a number of years ago, and this study concluded that the students were bored because education was irrelevant. Why did it matter? And so what you're talking about is adding life context to what we're learning. The reason that I might need to learn a language, for example, is there are other people live with other languages. Or the reason that I need to learn at least some of the basic components of math is because when I am creating a budget, or if I'm going to look at a company and determine whether it's profitable, you've got to be able to do some of the basics of math and apply it that way. And so that context becomes such an important part of the learning experience. Do you find that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when the intrinsic motivation is there, like the kid is a lot more interested in learning. Like for me, now I run my business, I'm a lot more inspired and interested in learning more about math, because as you mentioned, I need to look at my profit, I need to look at my cash flow. It involves math. But if you send me to a school to learn math for the sake of learning it, I'm probably not interested. Right. I see that in my own children, because now we homeschool our kids, and we see a substantial difference between like the time when they were schooling versus now homeschooling. And now they learn because they're interested. So they are a lot more passionate they are a lot more motivated to learn as opposed to before when they went to a school and they had to learn about things they are either interested or not interested. You just have to follow the curriculum. So it is totally different. Yeah, I think learning has to, you really have that internal drive, at least like I'm interested, right? Like people say a perfect example is learning the language. If you are dating someone who speaks this like language, you have no idea, but you are already in love with the person. You're like, yeah, you are a lot more motivated to learn a second language. Right. Then if you go to school, wow, I have to learn Spanish, for example, but you have no interest. It is a lot harder to learn that way versus, well, I really want to win his or her love. So I'm like interested in learning this language. Yeah, makes a huge difference.
What a great example. Yeah, the motivation to learn. And what we are developing, in my opinion, with our current education system, we are not developing learners. We are, lack a better way of putting it, we are creating professional students. And it's unfortunate because really learning has to be driven by our desire, our energy into it. I used to tell my students that the best thing that I could do for them as a teacher is get to a point where they don't need me, that I'm there just to make sure that they have what they need as they pursue their learning. So want to shift gears a little bit. And Ricky, I appreciate your comments and your support also. He's talking about, how that some alternate approaches bring freedom and peace to our young people, which is, as we talked about earlier, much needed for them rather than all the stress and all the wrong types of pressures. But you mentioned homeschooling. I am a huge fan of homeschooling, and I believe, just to be quite frank, that in terms of especially younger students, young people in their initial education, it is the best option for them, for a young person there is. And people, one of the biggest arguments, and I'll be curious to see what pushback you've received from people around you, but for when my children were young, we homeschooled, and everybody said, you're going to stunt their growth socially. They're not going to develop well socially. And I kept thinking, okay, we're putting them in a brick and mortar school for many hours a day, even longer than they have with their parents, and expecting that they're going to get socialized by all of these other young people who aren't socialized. And so that doesn't seem logical to me. What's been your experience with people's reaction to homeschooling?
Yeah, 100%. Not much has changed, and people still have that question. And in fact, that's a common question I got asked a lot, or every time when I have a homeschooler on my show, that question will 100% show up. Like, how about the social aspect? I think that's a big myth, and people think that you can only socialize in an artificial environment. And in fact, I think that's wrong. And I have met and taught so many students who were socializing in this artificial environment, but they cannot communicate because they're only used to socializing with their peers, people of the same age. But when you put them in a mixed age environment, all of a sudden they don't know how to talk to older people, how to talk to younger people. But whereas for homeschoolers, they are in an intergenerational environment on a daily basis. And if that is not socialization, what is socialization? And lots of research has really supported the benefits of a mixed age learning model. And that's why, my school, when I do the in-person immersion, we do a mixed age, people of different ages. And when you come together to learn, and you can see the younger people look up to the older kids, the older one, they copy us like coaches, mentors. They try to, be a positive role model for the younger kids. I think that is more similar to reality, how real life functions, right? In organizational environments, like Kevin, you and I, we all work with people like younger, older.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody only works with their peers. It doesn't make sense that you only socialize with your peers. So I have so much to say about that research-wise and from our personal experience. Like my 9-year-old, he is so sociable. If you put him in a environment, he will just be able to talk to anyone. They don't even see age differences. Really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable. As again, looking at my own children and their growth along the way. One of the comments, for example, my oldest child, without fail, any adult that would ever encounter my oldest child were truly surprised by the poise, the ability to look at them and shake their hand and introduce themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's real social skill. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to share, you'll appreciate this, you're talking about the international component. Karen offers, it's an awesome learning experience for students to travel abroad. They have an opportunity to be immersed in another culture, language, and development. And along what we're talking about, what better way to be socialized and be able to function in what has become a very small world and crossover of cultures than to experience it. And mm-hmm. the current education systems don't support that. Mm-hmm. The closest they come is if their school happens to be a diverse population, maybe, but even then, the focus isn't on socialization. It's on everybody getting into this production machine to make academic achievement. Mm-hmm. And it's not about healthy socialization. Mm-hmm. One of my experiences as a teacher is, again, at the high school level, I would periodically have students that were homeschooled in their earlier years come into my class. And it was without ever knowing that they were homeschooled, I could tell immediately because of a couple of attributes that were very evident. One was the level of confidence that was remarkable. Mm. Second was a level of maturity that was remarkably beyond. And third is their commitment and willingness to learn rather than expect me to hand everything to them. And the other one was, as a teacher, we always love to get questions. What about this? But so many of the young students don't do that. But the homeschool students that came in, they had no problem asking a question.
Absolutely. And I think all of those, I totally agree. And even on top of that, I think homeschoolers, they are better at take charge of their own freedom. Yeah, because they're used to having freedom and autonomy. And I always remember for my traditional students, if there's for example, a snow day or like a free day and class were canceled and they just didn't know what to do. They were like, yeah, like time to watch TV or something. Schoolers, right? Like even like a few weeks ago, we listened to NPR. They were saying that because so many students, they couldn't go back to school, they lost that routine, they lost that structure. I was like, oh, that's not the case for our kids because we homeschool them every day. They design, like the day before, they design their next day, in the morning, I want to do this, in the afternoon, I want to do this. This is a project. They're already building their own agency. But I think the problem is that formal schooling is taking away that agency from our children. So one day when school is not there, every kid's like, what to do? What time should I get up? There's like the whole day, how should I plan? They never learned that skill. So I think that is another really important skill that homeschoolers, they're learning as a result of their unique educational experience.
Right. And Linda makes a comment that kind of brings back to mind for me, reminds me of the Western times, talking about earlier U.S. history, when the term is shotgun schools. In other words, the extent of formal schooling was a one-room schoolhouse, and kids of all ages were in there learning. And a few years back, it was an interesting, again, statistic that said, and during that time period, what was education would take young people who were completely illiterate coming into whatever education process there was, and at least get them to a point where they were functionally literate. Whereas, the current education system is putting out people that are start out with some level of literacy because of the internet and TV and things, but they're not coming out being able to function well. Yes, they can maybe define a word or use a word, but in terms of really understanding it or being able to use it in context appropriately, and plus life skills, they're just not there. And so a more sad commentary on it. Now I'm curious because, again, back to the homeschooling concept. The other thing that I found remarkable, because in Georgia, we're required that students have to go through the periodic standardized testing of the, I'm trying to think of the instrument that's used. Anyway, every about third year in school, all the students are tested by this norming test. And one of the requirements of homeschooling in Georgia is homeschool students have to do the same thing. They have Iowa skills of basic, Iowa test of basic skills, I believe is the two.
Yeah.
And when we were doing that with my children, they always tested higher than what their expected grade level. At second grade, my children were testing at third and fourth grade levels. And so this idea that they're not academically challenged is crazy. The other part is that amount of time spent in formal education components. We were able to get all of the formal parts of education learning, which have to happen within 2 to 3 hours. Yet our students currently in elementary and middle school and high school are at school in a building for upwards of 8 hours. What's been your experience with homeschooling?
Exactly the same. I don't have to repeat your story. Exactly the same. And they can pretty much finish their schoolwork but in a few hours. So the rest of the day, they're working on their passion project, YouTube videos, and they also doing like research, reading books, and working on their project. So my 9-year-old just finished a big project on D-Day, which, because he's really into history, he proposed this. He did like comic books. He designed a D-Day universe in his Minecraft. He did YouTube video. He did a Canvas slide presentation, and he did a written report like that. We just finished that. And last week, we kind of mapped out, he wanted to do environment. So we're starting a new project. So yeah, like the schoolwork will only take so little time. I don't know how kids can spend the whole day working on this. But anyway, so a few hours, and then they also spend lots of time outside, outdoors. In our neighborhood, you rarely see children like running around outside, which is
right.
But I know we have lots of kids in the neighborhood. So our kids, they will spend so much time outdoors. They're also taking some online classes that they really enjoy. And then they work on their passion project. And yeah, they are definitely, and so my children are kind of young, but every state has different requirement, assessment. And so like my 9-year-old, he's supposed to be fourth grade. And I can see that his literature is already at like fifth grade level, but his math is at his current level. And my 6-year-old, his math is already second grade level, but his literature is like first grade level. So we can really customize that based on each kid's interest, how they learn, what they want to learn. We really nurture that. And that is another thing I love so much about homeschooling. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, the time goes fast. I suspect that we should do another show sometime. and talk some more, because I know we've just scratched the surface, but I want to give you an opportunity to share any last minute wisdom thoughts that you have that you would offer to either educators or to parents that are looking at making education choices.
Yeah, I think, parents really have to become more critical of the current education model. And I hate it when parents always say to their kids, listen to the teacher, listen to the teacher. And I don't think that is a healthy approach. You don't want to not listen to the teacher, but you want to be very critical. I don't think teacher knows everything. The teacher is the way they think is a product of the system. You have to be really, really critical instead of listening to the teacher. And I want to encourage parents to listen more to their own children, trust their children, listen to their children, to really practice collaborative parenting.
Yes. And hope that parents will shift the priority of education. If they have to send or choose to send their child to one of the education entities, treat it as a supplement to what's at home. Take ownership of your child's education as a parent, and let the school be a supplement. It is not, should not be your primary education tool. The home should be that. And that alone will improve the odds of some youngster that's in the education system. But beyond that, I'm with you. Let's consider very strongly doing homeschooling. And so hope that those that were with us today, thank you, enjoyed it so much, and hope you'll join us next Monday. I'm always here on Mondays at 8. And I will see if I can get on Dr. I's schedule to join us again, because she has so much to offer from a lot of perspectives that offers some wisdom in regards to education. So thank you, Dr. I really appreciate it. And like I said, hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Kevin, for having me.
Have a great week, everybody. God bless. Take care, and we'll see you next week.